It's Ask Us Anything on the Goggler Podcast. Bahir and Uma with you. Our first question this week is from at Joaim Lim89, who asks, have we covered Ted Lasso Season 4 hypotheses yet? Well, we spoke about it briefly when it was announced that some of the actors had their contracts renewed by Warner. But we haven't heard anything since. If there is any hypothesis about where the season might go, I don't know how you feel about this, Bahir, but I think I'm done with the Ted Lasso story, but I would like to see them follow up on the all women's team story.
Right.
Because I think the Ted Lasso arc with him going back to his son and all of that stuff, I don't want to fuck that up. I'm like, that's done. He had his happy ending. He may not have won the Premier League, but he still got his happy ending with his son. And I'm like, that's cool. And the good thing about that series is that the side characters were so strong that I think if you just had Coach and you had Roy Kent, you can actually carry something with that. I think if you had Hannah Waddingham and Juno Temple, I think it would be a fun series still.
I have to respectfully disagree. Only because then it will feel like season 1 all over again, right? Like you have to get a coach, you then have to build a team, then it's like this building of this team that everybody made fun of. I don't know if that's what I want to see. I'd much rather Ted and his son come back. Or I have some unfinished business type thing. Like I think that would be funner as compared to let's build out a new team.
Funnily enough, there is a template for this in Wrexham. And I think there is a storyline there that they could follow.
The AFC Richmond don't have a women's team. So they have to build that team.
Oh, no. But what I mean is, what if they take over a women's team? Like, what if another women's team comes to Richmond? Like, what if Hannah Waddingham, with all of her money, buys a team and moves it to Richmond? Because that's possible.
Not in the UK.
Oh, Canada. Only in the US you can do that?
Only in the US is a franchise team. I mean, I'm not saying you can't, but like people have done it and it's not good for the team. Like it never turns out well for the team.
Drama and conflict right there, my friend.
No, I just feel like I don't know if I want to see that story. Like, I think you're right. I think that's a way in. I'm just not sure personally if I want to see that story.
Yeah, I don't know if personally I want to see more of Ted's story if they're going to fuck it up.
Like, as much as I love those characters, I don't know if I want a 4th season. The show's called Ted Lasso, and without Ted Lasso in it, it's like Frasier, but without Frasier. Like, I love Niles, but I don't want to follow Niles.
One other option would be not have a Ted Lasso series. Do a Frasier type thing where you spin it out of Cheers, right? So you have a show that spins out of Ted Lasso, featuring maybe the club, maybe the same characters, but doing something slightly different. I think that could work.
I just feel like hypothetical season 4 has got too many opportunities for personal disappointment for me. And I'm just worried that I don't know if I want to see any more.
It's all hypothetical at the moment because obviously no one has signed on for anything or agreed to anything yet. So there is no Ted Lasso season 4 to speak of. But if there were, these are our concerns.
Tapao Z asks, who would be in Goggler's dream casting for a rebooted live-action X-Men? Let's do Wolverine, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Magneto, and Professor X. Uma, you want to take this one?
I mean, okay, so ever since Feige announced that the X-Men are coming to the MCU, there is no way the old cast can return because a lot of them are pretty old. And I'm talking about the original X-Men stuff. Maybe some of the first class stuff, but even they're getting on, and I don't know if they want to play those characters again. And if you're going to reboot the X-Men, you want to start off maybe from when they were younger. So a lot of my dream casting has characters like Jean Grey and Cyclops being quite young, because then they'll have a longer shelf life in the MCU. For Xavier, I was thinking maybe Mark Strong or Stanley Tucci.
I love both those actors. My problem is Patrick Stewart is so embedded in my brain that it's hard to get out of it.
I was completely hooked on Patrick Stewart because he was the perfect Professor X, but McAvoy did a pretty good job, I thought.
The only reason my brain allowed that to happen was because it was so far back in the past. Very young Professor X. I found it hard when they made him wear a bald cap and put him in a wheelchair. That just didn't feel right because I still kept seeing Patrick Stewart.
What about Magneto? I was thinking Christoph Waltz, maybe.
That's a pretty good one.
Ralph Fiennes as well.
I feel like I have a harder time with Ralph Fiennes. I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't know if he's too associated with Voldemort.
Yeah.
But Christoph Waltz could be a pretty cool Magneto.
Christoph Waltz could be a cool Magneto.
Jean Grey and Cyclops, in my head, Sadie Sink and Jacob Elordi.
Mm, those are good.
Like Jacob Elordi has this very statuesque build, which I think works for certain artistic representations of Cyclops. It could be pretty cool.
I agree. Yeah, 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 yeah.
And with Wolverine, I mean, there were rumors that Daniel Radcliffe might play Wolverine. I think he'd be fucking great as Wolverine. But I don't know if he still wants the job or if he's too old for the job. But also, I was thinking about Charles Melton, who has this very squarish face and could
Oh,
work as
yeah.
Wolverine.
And he's young enough to put on the muscle.
But then again, Wolverine is hundreds of years old. So maybe they want a slightly older actor? I don't know.
My question is this. There is no indication from Feige and Marvel that the X-Men will be a young X-Men. I kind of love the idea that they're just going to jump into it. The way Fantastic Four looks like they're just going to jump into it. I kind of like that idea. I like the idea that if there was an X-Men movie, that it's an X-Men movie. It isn't a, oh, let's find out how the X-Men became the X-Men movie. I kind of like that idea now. The way they treated Spider-Man was fantastic, I thought.
Same. No origin story, none of that nonsense. Just get straight into it. And I think that works well. And I think you don't have to do it anymore, given that even with Deadpool and Wolverine, they've acknowledged the existence of all of the X-Men stories. So there's absolutely no need to retell and reintroduce what mutants are, etc., etc. I think it just slows the whole thing down.
I'm kind of okay with the idea of the First Class coming back.
I don't think any of them want to. I think the last Fox X-Men movie kind of killed any hope of that.
That's true.
It
Yeah,
felt like
okay.
everyone was phoning that movie in.
Unfortunately, I have no dream casting for this, but I will go with yours. I like your list.
At Kailash Laxman asks, so I woke up this morning to find out that Blade had been removed from the Marvel release schedule. Why do you think this is the case? Do you think the MCU's future is looking better or worse than before now that the hype around RDJ returning has settled? I think they just can't get a handle on Blade or what they want it to be. Many people have tried
Yeah.
writing a script, they failed. I think they've lost two directors. They are looking for a new director. At this point, I'm not even sure Mahershala Ali is interested anymore because it's been years since the announcement. And I think removing it from the schedule was probably the best thing to do. Just wait until you get that damn movie right.
That's the thing that all these movie studios with illusions of cinematic universe and interconnectedness should do. Just leave it alone. Just work on it. Like, I love Green Lantern and I'm disappointed that it's taking so long. But yeah, it's okay. You don't have to work to some arbitrary timeline and just force your hand constantly to get a movie out.
I think what's important with this announcement, and this answers the second part of your question as to the state of the MCU, I think what's important to note is that they're taking their time with it. I think what happened before, through the pandemic and also through the writers' strikes and all of that stuff, was that they had so much content out there that the rumor was that Kevin Feige wasn't as involved as he was in the early stages of the MCU. And I think he's taken a more active step in every aspect of film production and TV production. And it feels like they're really paying attention to the quality of the stuff they put out. If that is true, if that is the case, then I think this can only be a good thing. So I don't need 5, 6, 7 Marvel movies a year. Just give me 2 Marvel movies a year as long as they're great.
If anything, this is a righting of the ship. We'll see what that does. I've got no dog in the fight with regards to whether the MCU is moving up or down in terms of quality. If they do good stuff, we'll watch it. If they don't do good stuff, we'll watch it and then just say bad things about it. Like, I'm looking for good films. If it's 4 movies a year from one studio, that's fine. If it's 1 movie a year from one studio, that's fine.
I mean, you can talk about the decline of the superhero movie, etc., all you want, but there's no escaping that this sort of comic book film has become the predominant cultural force of this era over the last 10 to 15 years. And you need to look no further than its pervasiveness everywhere. So it's not just billion-dollar box office, it's in your supermarkets, it's in merchandise, it's the only thing your children talk about, and it's become this real cultural force. And so that, I think, plays a very important role in actually driving where it goes. It's the snake eating the tail thing, but in a good way, if that makes sense, because it's a predominant cultural force, but then everyone's talking about it, and that has an impact on which direction it takes. And then it no longer sets the agenda, but the agenda begins to set it, and so on and so forth, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah, everything is cyclical, but we're in the superhero cycle at the moment.
like you just said quite brilliantly, Umar, that's not a bad thing. But also, it's not the first time, right? In the
Exactly.
40s and the 50s, the Western was
Correct.
everywhere. So to say that Hollywood studios are bad because all they do now is do shitty comic book movies, no, I disagree, because you and I are big historians of Hollywood, and they used to do this all the time. There was the westerns of the 40s and the 50s, which were everywhere. They used to make children's western TV shows, right? Then it was the musical. This happens all the time. So it is not a damning indictment of Hollywood as an industry. That's what they are. They are an industry. They're all chasing the money. And if the money is here, then so be it. I think the one lesson that I'm hoping the studios learn from all this is there used to be a Hollywood rule of thumb. You make 10 movies, one movie will make bank and pay for the other nine, two will fail, four will do okay. There is a rule of thumb with these things. However, it's just that right now Hollywood is just making the one, hoping for it to make bank. And that's a mistake, but that's fine. That's a mistake everybody needs to learn.
Yeah.
At Rabbit Hop asks, I don't think Malaysia will have another movie that can be nominated into the Oscars again for the next 10 years or so if Malaysia doesn't invest in the film industry. The second part of the question, Rabbit Hop, kind of answers the first point. Look, Malaysia doesn't invest enough is the problem. They don't invest enough. They don't invest in the right people. We are hearing a lot of talk from Finas at the moment. It's not to be reported just yet, but I disagree. I don't think it'll be 10 years. I think maybe not next year, but the year after that could be a good one. I feel like enough good films have been made that the producers and the industry is seeing that there's value there. However, the Malaysian public also need to play their part. When a good movie comes out, you have to go watch it. You have to go watch La Luna, you have to go watch Abang Adik. By people not turning out for those films, you're also telling producers a story. By waiting for it to show up on Netflix, you're also telling a film producer a story. We know of a few film producers who've decided that maybe producing films are not the best way forward for them. Yeah, the industry is not doing great. I think Malaysia as a nation is not supportive enough, but it's getting there. I don't think it'll be 10 years.
I don't think the Oscars are that important. I don't think we're anywhere close to being nominated or winning. However, I do think that it's an interesting benchmark, but that's about it. I think we should just focus on investing in the film industry, telling good stories, training good directors, training good actors, writers, etc., etc. Forget about the Oscars. Every time Finas announces a road to Oscars thing, I roll my eyes because I just think it's bullshit. Forget about the Oscars. Just focus on making good movies and telling good stories, and we'll get there sooner than you think.
The Oscars isn't a benchmark for us. It shouldn't be.
I suggest you go and read up about how the Oscars works as well. It's just a popularity contest, right? And a lot of the time, the popularity contest is also dependent on how much money the studios spend sending you swag bags. So,
Yeah.
the Oscars aren't that important, at least not for Malaysia. It's important to people within that industry because it affects their pay, it affects their next job, etc., etc. So it's a big deal in Hollywood. But for us in Malaysia, whatever. Ed Jagger asks, what do you think of the direction of the Venom franchise after The Last Dance? I don't think Sony knows the direction of the franchise, if only because there haven't been any major announcements after Craven. It feels like Sony was trying to get rid of all of these movies and just be done with it before maybe trying something new with Spider-Man 4. Madam Web, Morbius, Craven, Venom. With Craven out later this year, all of that's done. I think the Bad Bunny one has been cancelled, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure.
Yes.
And I don't recall if there are any other Spidey spin-offs in production or pre-production. And so they might just be focusing on Spider-Man 4. Even in interviews, Tom Hardy says never say never, but he doesn't confirm anything about returning to the franchise. And we have no word on whether or not Venom is going to come into the MCU, because in The Last Dance, they kind of retcon what happened in the post-credit scene of Spider-Man.
There was a Jimmy Fallon interview with Tom Holland that went out this week where he essentially confirms 4 is shooting.
He confirms Spider-Man is going to start shooting next year,
Yeah.
but Feige hasn't confirmed anything. So here's the thing. Sony can make a Spider-Man movie. No problem. They don't need Marvel to do it. They don't need Feige to do it. But there was a deal between Sony and the MCU. If you make a Spider-Man movie, you can have one of our characters, so we can have your character. It's a joint production, and we make a lot of money out of it, and everyone is happy. But we don't know what the state is with Spider-Man 4. And we don't know if it is an MCU product. It would be silly if it isn't. But
Yeah.
I guess we'll need to wait for more information on that. Potentially, at next year's D23, maybe they might announce more stuff. I don't know.
At HSNZM asks, why Goggler?
I think we've answered this question before, but if you're new to Goggler,
Welcome.
hello. But the answer is very simple. We goggle at things, Bahir and I, and everyone here at Goggler. And we thought it would be a cool name because it doesn't just speak to us goggling, staring at screens and watching movies. It allows us to expand in the future to other things that we like to goggle at. Books and art and theater and music, maybe, potentially, who knows. But we thought Goggler was a cool, all-encompassing name that covers that. So that's why Goggler. But yes, welcome if you are new. At Iman Bahare asks, why hasn't there been a reboot of Creature from the Black Lagoon? There are rumors of James Wan possibly directing a modern adaptation, but why has it taken this long for the OG Ocean Man to return to the big screen? Do people not like fish humanoids, unless you count The Shape of Water? This is a very good question. I don't have an answer for it, but I think you may be onto something. I don't know if people find fishy humanoid things just too comedic and not scary enough. Yeah, it's like, why haven't they done a proper Swamp Thing? Actually, they did briefly on HBO, but it was so short-lived because there were production issues and studio issues, and they canceled that show. But that was going in a very good direction. But yeah, I think it's the same reason people laugh at Aquaman.
I have a simpler reason. I think it's just because it's Universal Studios.
You're right. Universal just can't get their act together when it comes to their Monsterverse.
Yeah, this is that Monsterverse thing that they tried to do, right? They tried to reboot it all under one banner, under Tom Cruise and Russell Crowe and all those fancy, beautiful things that they wanted to do. But then I won't say they chickened out, but I just think that they couldn't decide on the direction.
To be fair, I think they did chicken out because yes, The Mummy didn't work and it was a financial failure. But so were some of the early movies in the MCU. But I think they stuck to their guns and they had a plan and they kept going. But I think someone at Universal, at the studio, lost their nerve. And I think that was the problem.
You know, we all forget that the Ed Norton Hulk is technically canon within the MCU.
But also just a bleh movie.
Also just a bleh movie, right? But you're right, they chickened out. You can course correct. You course correct, right? You've got Tom Cruise, Russell Crowe. The Mummy didn't work. Fine. I'm sorry that happened to you. But course correct and try again. You don't drop it. At Alif FLNS asks, I understand this has been covered multiple times. Could you guys, for the one last time, call out and mention the theaters in Klang Valley that does a good job in maintaining the CinemaScope ratio with curtain adjustments? Do you want to do this one?
I'm sorry, Alif, we can't because there isn't a single cinema that is consistently doing that. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So it is really up to the manager, to the person on duty, to the person in that room controlling the curtains. And there isn't any standards, and that is the problem. I think if this is something that bothers you, and God knows it bothers us all the time, I think you should write into the cinemas. Start complaining to the cinemas because then they will take it seriously. Because right now, their mentality is, oh, nobody cares lah, nobody notices lah, whatever. We've got their money, right?
The reason we don't do it is because when we tell them, they brush it off, right? Oh, you guys are just film nerds. How many Malaysians are thinking like you out there? It's okay, one. Nobody will say anything. So I think that's the concern. With these things, we need people to reach out to the cinemas themselves because when we do it, it doesn't matter.
So go on their social media, write them emails, just complain, complain, complain. And if you complain enough, they will do something. And it's only when the public does it en masse will things change. But we feel your pain. We too get very annoyed when we're not watching something the way it's supposed to be watched. We've got two questions from @KieranJacob15. The first question, your mention of Ta-Nehisi Coates sent me down a rabbit hole. What do you think of his works, comic book run, larger-than-life personality, and most importantly, his controversies? I'm not sure what his controversies are. I didn't know there were many controversies regarding Ta-Nehisi Coates. So I didn't think there were any controversies, but I am a huge fan. I think he is one of the greatest thinkers of this generation. I think his writings are absolutely amazing. His book, We Were 8 Years in Power, about the Obama years, is a fantastic read. His latest collection of essays called The Message is also absolutely brilliant. He talks about Israel and Palestine and his trip to the West Bank and East Jerusalem. You have to read the book, but even if you don't, just read that segment. I think it is profound and clever and very well thought out. And then, man, his runs on Black Panther and Captain America are amazing. As far as contemporary comic book runs go, it is right up there. So you can't really go wrong with reading any Ta-Nehisi Coates. I am a huge fan. I don't know about the controversies, though. I know there are lots of people who disagree with him, but they are mostly Republican assholes.
Kieran's second question. As critics, you get early access to series where you review the first episode or the first few. Curious to know how often your opinion changes, either from loving the first few to not liking the series when the season concludes, or vice versa. I remember the reception to BoJack Horseman wasn't great when critics first reviewed the first few episodes. Critical reception skyrocketed when the season wrapped. It's happened to us a couple of times.
It's not often, actually. I mean,
yeah,
the most obvious examples are Secret Invasion and Andor. So with Secret Invasion, we got access to the first few episodes and we really loved it because it felt like a Cold War spy thriller. And then it turned out really shit by the time it reached the last episode, like super, super shit. So much so that Marvel completely ignored it when they made The Marvels.
That really felt like it was out of our hands because the number of episodes they gave us was exactly when the season, or rather the series, changed tone. The second half of that series, when it suddenly becomes this really lame superhero punch up whatever series, was not any of the ones we were shown. We were shown right up to the point where it stopped becoming a Cold War spy thriller.
And I'm waiting for the second season to maybe address some of my concerns with the first two episodes of Andor. I still dislike the first two episodes of Andor with a passion. I just think they're absolutely pointless. The whole story with his sister that ends up going nowhere by the time season 1 ends. They don't even talk about it ever again. And I don't think it's important to the story that they're telling in Andor. And I thought that was just filler and a waste of time. But then Andor got excellent. Andor got very, very good. And that's rare. So it's very rare that a series completely goes off the rails. Usually 3 or 4 episodes is a very good way to judge whether a series is good or not because, good writing kind of shows itself.
But also, due to our experience, we can almost see what is being set up, what they're trying to set up, right? In the first 2 episodes, you have to set up the show. And I think that was what our problem was with Andor. The first 2 episodes set up a completely different show. The first 2 episodes set up a show where this guy was trying to find his sister. And I didn't want that show. And I didn't get it. And I think that is the problem.
All of that stuff with the flashback as well. Oh my God.
Yeah. Why?
So
Why are we following
boring.
these children?
Exactly.
Yeah. Like, what does this set up? Nothing.
A lot of people also ask us why we review a show after just a few episodes. And I'm afraid that is just the nature of the work, in that the job that we do as film and television critics means that we need to get our review out there as part of the massive media cycle that exists. Also, one of the conditions on which we get these episodes is the trade-off that we will review the show once we've seen it. if a show ends up going down a terrible path, then we do return to it. Just like how we revised our review of Andor and we revised our review of Secret Invasion. But it's very rare that we've actually done that. Sometimes shows improve in second seasons and third seasons and fourth seasons because they do a massive course correction or they change showrunners or do something completely different, right? And in that case, we actually consider those seasons and re-review a show as well. We tend to review every season of a show if we can. And I think Game of Thrones is a very interesting example of how our reviews kind of shifted from season to season. Same with House of the Dragon. I think we were a bit underwhelmed with season 1. We didn't like all the time jumps. Season 2 improved a little bit because there were less time jumps, but at the same time, it wasn't peak Game of Thrones for us. I think talking about TV shows and movies is a constant conversation. Nothing is set in stone. A lot of the times, I have revisited movies that I've disliked or even liked and found that I've changed my opinion about it years later. And I don't know why that is. It could be a whole bunch of different things, where I am in my life, whether I have children or not, whether I just got married. All of these things kind of affect what I watch and how I watch it. And so I think it's a constant conversation. I don't think it's set in stone. And I think we're constantly having that conversation with each other and with you guys as well. For us, that's what reviewing is all about lah. I still hate Interstellar though. Still.
And I still don't like La La Land.
Oh yeah, you just rewatched
I think
it
for
as well.
us, it's also about being honest, right? And I just rewatched it. I wanted
You tried
to prove to
again.
myself.
You tried again.
I
But you were
tried
like,
again.
you know what?
I tried again.
I'm going to try again and see how I feel. And the answer is still no.
The first time I watched it, I wasn't married. Maybe I was just in a bad moment in my life. And this time I'm married and I've got a new TV and I'm happy. And I'm like, nope, still don't enjoy it. When we say something, we stand by it. But we are also not against admitting we were wrong. Yes, we will maybe try and, I wouldn't say excuses, but we will justify why we thought we were wrong. And I think that's fair. I think we have to be honest and transparent about it. We cannot just let a review stand up there when we've changed our minds. For example, like Andor. For example, like Secret Invasion. We were very happy with Secret Invasion until we saw the entire thing. Then we went back and changed it. We were not happy with Andor. But then when we saw the whole thing, we went back and changed it. Yeah, some people will say, why don't you hold off your review until you are more certain?
To answer that, more often than not, we are certain. And more often than not, we don't change our mind.
Just because of our experience.
Yeah.
The number of shows we watch, the number of things we've seen and read and studied. We're not that concerned about it.
I think in all of the years we've been doing this, maybe there are 3 or 4 examples out of the hundreds and hundreds of shows that we've reviewed.
Yeah.
I mean, every few years, I try to rewatch the Star Wars prequels, but nope, still rubbish.
I still fall asleep.
If you want a good sleep, put on Phantom Menace. Wake up for the pod racing scene, wake up for Duel of the Fates, and then go back to sleep again.
Yeah.
Everyone, thank you so much for sending in your questions. This has been another exciting episode of Ask Us Anything. Keep them coming in. You know how to reach out. Goggler MY, all of our social media feeds. You can also email us on podcast@goggler.my or send us a WhatsApp on the Goggler hotline, 012-524-5208. Thank you so much for listening. This is the Goggler Podcast.